Logan Pierce, a successful yet lonely businessman, accidentally encounters two young girls whose faces eerily resemble his late ex-wife. When their eyes land on an old photograph in his wallet, a door to the past is violently torn open. What secrets have been buried all these years? And who is he truly in the lives of these children? That afternoon, the sky seemed to tilt toward nostalgia. Logan Pierce, a man known as a cold billionaire, had just stepped out of a tense meeting in the city center when a faint rumble of thunder drew his attention back. No rain fell, but in his heart, an old rain was falling again, as if fate was softly knocking at his door. He told his driver to pull over by the roadside so he could grab a coffee. The small shop, tucked between a row of weathered old buildings, was unremarkable, until he noticed two little girls huddled on its porch. Beside them was a tattered bag and a small sign. "I'm not begging, just need warm water and bread for my little sister." Logan froze. He had never paid much attention to the homeless, but the eyes of the older girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't just that they seemed too mature for her age. They were identical to those of someone he once loved. He approached, his voice soft. "Who are you waiting for? Why are you here alone with your sister?" The girl looked up. Her face was dirty, her hair a mess, but her eyes were sharp with caution. "Our mom died. The police officer told us to wait here for someone to adopt us, but today's the 5th day." She didn't cry. Her younger sister had fallen asleep, her head resting on her shoulder. Logan crouched down, about to ask more, when something fell from the girl's bag, an old photo with worn edges. He bent to pick it up and hand it back, but as soon as he glanced at it, Logan froze as if struck by lightning. In the photo was a woman holding 2 newborn girls. Her name was Sarah, the woman who had once set his heart ablaze in his youth. Sarah, the one he had lost. Logan stopped short. His hand trembled slightly. The photo had no date, but he could never mistake the woman in it. Do you know your mom's name?" "Sarah? Sarah Moore." Her answer stabbed through his chest like a knife. His vision blurred for a moment, his heart pounding wildly. He tried to stay calm. "Do you know who your father is?" "Mom never told us, but she cried once and said he was someone who never came back." Logan gripped the photo tightly, then gently handed it back to the girl. He said nothing more. He just stood there, as if turned to stone. All these years he had thought Sarah had left the city, started a new life. He hadn't known she'd had children, let alone that they might be his. "What's your name?" "Emma." "My sister's Lily." "Emma." "Lily." The 2 names rang out like stray notes in the mournful symphony of his life. Logan sat down beside them, feeling an emptiness within him being filled by something instinctive, something fatherly. He asked softly, "Have you eaten anything?" "Someone gave us bread yesterday, but Lily's stomach hurt, so I didn't dare ask for more." Logan stood up and called his assistant to bring food. While waiting, he sat back down, studying the girls as if trying to etch every detail into his heart. Emma kept her distance. She didn't seem to trust anyone but herself. Logan didn't blame her. He only felt a pang of sorrow. Who was he to these 2 children? Or someone who had missed their entire childhood? The afternoon rain finally began to fall. Logan took off his coat and gently draped it over the girls. He didn't know how to be a father. He'd never even considered having kids. But in that moment, as Emma nestled closer to shield Lily, he knew his heart had just been tethered again by a thin, unbreakable thread. He whispered, almost to himself, "Sarah, how did you live all those years? Why didn't you tell me?" Emma looked up, a hint of softness breaking through her guarded gaze. "Do you know my mom?" Logan only nodded, slowly. "I did. And I owe her a lot." A black car pulled up. His assistant stepped out, carrying food and hot water. Emma stared at the steaming meal as if she couldn't believe it. Logan instructed, "After you eat, I'll take you both to a hotel. You can stay with me for now, okay?" Emma glanced at Lily, who was running a slight fever, then nodded, saying nothing more. Logan opened the car door and lifted Lily into his arms. The little girl mumbled in her sleep, faintly calling, "Mommy." His heart felt like it was being crushed. He settled into the seat and closed the door. The rain pattered against the car windows in steady drops. Logan turned to see Emma clutching the photo to her chest, the photo that had just rerouted his entire life. And he knew his journey of redemption had begun. 2 days later, Logan stood before a small wooden house tucked away in a quiet alley more than 10 miles from the city center. The surroundings bore the mossy hue of time, as if they had been forgotten in someone's memory. The wind rustled through dry branches, carrying the scent of burnt grass and the dust of ages, the smell of untold stories. Logan looked up at the second-floor window, where a faint golden light once glowed, and the silhouette of a woman sat embroidering late into the night. Sarah had lived here. He stepped onto the weathered porch, his foot brushing against the worn, warped wood. The veranda was covered in dried leaves. The house had been abandoned for a long time, but when his hand touched the doorknob, a memory surged back powerfully. Back then, she had stood right here in a simple white dress, her hair loose, giggling as he tucked a wildflower behind her ear. "Is this your house?" he had asked. "No, just a temporary shelter, but it's the only place where I can be myself," she had replied. The old door creaked open with a dry, grating sound like a sigh from the past. Logan stepped inside, leaving the lights off. Dust coated the wooden floor, but a few pictures still hung on the walls, among them a pencil sketch of him and Sarah taped crookedly, its edges yellowed with age. At the back of the house was a small kitchen, once filled with the warm scent of ginger cookies whenever he visited. Now it stood empty and silent. Logan sat on an old wooden chair, his gaze settling on a thin notebook buried under a layer of newspapers. He picked it up, opened the first page, and recognized Sarah's handwriting. "April, I'm pregnant. Twins. I'm scared. But I also feel something sacred in the life growing inside me each day. Even though you're no longer with me, I'll still bring them into this world, even if it's just me." Logan's hand clenched. His heart ached with every beat. He flipped through the other pages, scattered diary entries written irregularly, as if penned on nights when she struggled to keep going. One passage stole his breath. "Some days I wish you'd come back, but I also understand not everyone has the courage to love a poor, pregnant, broken woman. I've learned to stop hoping, but every time I watch the 2 children sleep, I feel peace." Logan's throat tightened. Where had he been during those years? He had left Sarah after an argument when he learned she was pregnant. He didn't believe the child was his. He let pride and his family's prejudices drown out his true feelings. Then he buried himself in work, power, and money, forgetting that a woman was out there, fighting to survive with 2 small children. He climbed the second floor and opened the door at the end of the hall, a tiny room painted pale pink, its walls decorated with images of teddy bears. A broken crib lay folded in the corner, and on the wall were pencil marks tracking heights. Below the line labeled Emma, 3 years old, was a child's scrawled writing, "Mommy, I love you." Logan stood still for a long time. Something inside him shattered beyond repair, not his pride, but regret. He stepped out to the back porch, where a rocking chair with a broken leg sat. A woman had once sat there, cradling 2 children in her arms, singing to them in a hoarse, weary voice. Each note seemed to tear at the heart. Logan looked up at the sky. Clouds drifted silently by, like time itself. He whispered, "Sarah, I can't change the past, but I'll do everything to redeem the future of the 3 people who were once mine." After leaving the old house, Logan couldn't sleep. Sarah's diary entries, the little pink room, the child's whispered, "Mommy, I love you." They all echoed relentlessly in his mind. The next morning, he returned to the shelter where Emma and Lily were temporarily staying. The 2 girls sat together, Emma helping her younger sister tie her shoelaces with a serious expression that was almost comical. "Would you like to go to the park with me?" Logan asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. Emma looked up, her eyes wary. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Lily, as usual, stayed close behind her sister, clutching the hem of her dress with both hands. The three of them headed to the car. Logan wasn't familiar with child car seats and had no idea whether to turn on a kid's radio station or keep it quiet. He fumbled awkwardly. But when Lily handed him a pre-unwrapped lollipop for the first time, he laughed genuinely. At the park, Emma pulled her sister toward the slide. Logan sat on a bench watching them. He noticed Lily glancing back at him after every step as if to make sure he was still there. After a while, Emma ran back, holding a wildflower in her hand. "Uncle, do you know what this flower's called?" "No, I'm not very good with flowers. Mom said it's called forget-me-not. She said it's a reminder to never forget the people you love." Logan's heart clenched. Who was the little girl talking about? Sarah? He bent down, accepting the small flower. "Thank you. I'll remember that." The next day, Logan decided to bring the girls to his home for a few days with temporary permission from the shelter. His mansion, once filled only with the hum of air conditioning and the rustle of printed reports, now echoed with children's laughter. Everything came alive, but there were also moments of hilarious chaos. At their first dinner, Emma frowned at the sight of an expensive steak. "Don't you have fried eggs with rice?" Logan was flustered. His fridge had never held anything beyond imported butter and mineral water. He asked his private chef to make egg-fried rice according to Emma's precise instructions, and for the first time, the three of them ate dinner amid laughter. Lily picked at her rice grains but turned to whisper to her sister, "It's better than at the shelter." When night fell, Logan read the girls a bedtime story. His voice grew hoarse and stumbled. Unlike Sarah's, he imagined her sitting at the bedside, gently patting their backs, reading with all her heart. Now, he clumsily held a fairy tale book, mispronouncing characters' names, making Emma burst into laughter and Lily giggle behind her hand. "You read like a robot, but I like it," Emma said. How could such childish words touch an adult's heart so deeply? That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Logan sat alone by the living room window, still holding the lollipop Lily had given him that morning. He looked out at the garden where perfectly trimmed bushes once stood for media photos. Now, he thought about planting some forget-me-not flowers. He didn't know if he was the girl's biological father. The DNA test results were still pending, but in this moment, when his house was no longer silent, when someone called him uncle with a radiant smile, when tiny hands gripped his tightly in a crowded market, he knew an invisible bond had been tied, not by blood, but by the heart. Logan had just stepped down the stairs when he saw the butler hesitating at the front door, still holding the latch. "Sir, there's a man. He says he's the biological father of the two girls." Logan froze. "What's his name?" "Tom Reeves." That name, it had never appeared in Sarah's records. It wasn't mentioned in her diary. Logan felt as if someone had just dropped a boulder into the calm lake of his heart. "Let him in." The door opened and a middle-aged man stepped inside. His coat was frayed at the shoulders, his hair streaked with gray, but his eyes were sharp and cold. That gaze swept over the luxurious villa with an unnamed tension before settling on Logan. "And you are?" "Logan Pierce. The girls are staying with me right now." Tom narrowed his eyes. "I know. I've been following the news from the shelter. They said you took Emma and Lily to your home. I'm their real father." Logan said nothing. In that moment, he heard the patter of small footsteps from the upstairs hallway. "Emma, Lily, don't come down here," he called up, but it was too late. The two girls appeared on the staircase, their eyes wide. Lily immediately shrank behind her sister while Emma stood still. Tom took a step forward. "Emma, do you remember Daddy?" The question, it rang through the silence like a punch. Emma frowned. "Mom never talked about a dad. She only said he was someone very far away." Her answer twisted Logan's heart, and Tom flinched for a moment. Your mom was just mad at me, but now I'm here to take you both home. We're family." Lily quickly grabbed Logan's hand, shaking her head. Emma stepped back, her young eyes flickering with doubt. "Uncle Logan takes care of us. He cooks rice. He tells stories. He's not a stranger." Tom turned to Logan, forcing a stiff smile. "Looks like you've won over my kids faster than I expected." Logan remained calm. "If you're truly their biological father, I won't stop you, but can you prove it?" Tom pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "DNA test results from a private lab." Logan took it. The results. Undeniable. 99.9% the man standing before him was indeed Emma and Lily's biological father. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, as if a door in his heart had just slammed shut. "I'll come for them next week. I've hired a lawyer." "Don't try to keep them with your money," Tom said, his voice cold as steel. Then he turned and left, leaving behind a thick, stifling atmosphere. Logan turned to the girls. Lily was sobbing. Emma stayed quiet, but her lips were pressed tight, her hand still clutching her sister's. "I don't want to go," Emma whispered. "I don't know who he is. Uncle Logan." "Don't let us go." Her plea, soft as a breeze, struck him like thunder. That night, Logan sat at his desk, reopening Sarah's diary. He flipped through page after page, line after line, searching for any fragment of memory tied to the name Tom Reeves. And then, at the end of the notebook, he found a page folded in half. "If Tom ever comes back one day, don't let him take the children. He's not a bad person, but he's weak. He left when he found out I was pregnant. His fear was always greater than his love." Logan closed the diary, his chest tight. Sometimes, blood isn't enough to define a father, and sometimes, love doesn't need to be born from blood, but from presence, from bedtime stories, from clumsy fried eggs, from a small hand holding his in the dark. Logan knew. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but he wouldn't let go. The courtroom echoed with the dry clack of the wooden gavel. Based on the DNA test results and given no evidence that the biological father, Mr. Tom Reeves, is incapacitated or has violated the law, the court grants Mr. Reeves' legal request for custody. The two children, Emma and Lily, will be transferred to live with him pending the completion of official procedures. The judge struck the gavel once more. Logan went numb. In that moment, his entire world seemed to shatter. Emma turned to look at him, her eyes brimming with tears but resolute. Lily burst into sobs, clinging tightly to her sister's hand, her gaze still fixed on Logan, the man who had given the two sisters their first real home. Logan started to step forward, but a court officer raised a hand to stop him. "I'm sorry, you can't approach the children anymore, not until there's a new ruling." He stood there, helpless, watching as court officials led the girls away, as if they were two pieces of his heart being torn out without even a chance to say goodbye. On the other side of the room, Tom Reeves put on a pair of sunglasses, silently following the daughters he hadn't known for 10 years. There was just one difference. He held legal documents. Logan, love. Outside the courtroom, an unannounced autumn rain poured down, pattering like wordless tears. Logan sat alone on a stone bench, his suit soaked through, his leather shoes caked with mud. But he didn't care. Everything inside him was now a cold, desolate void. "Sarah," he whispered in his heart, like a plea for help. "You left the girls to this world, but I was the one who chose to hold them, and now I have to let go." His phone rang. It was his private lawyer, Susan Bennett. "Logan, I'm sorry, I know you did everything you could, but the law, it still prioritizes blood ties unless you can prove Tom is unfit morally or behaviorally. So what do we do next?" "We appeal, and this time, I'll personally dig into his past." Logan nodded, though he knew Susan couldn't see him. "I can't let them leave my life like this. I can't." That night, Logan's house fell into a terrifying silence. No more giggles from the bathroom, no more scribbled drawings on the kitchen walls. No more little feet running to the door when he came home. All that remained were two small ceramic mugs on the shelf, one with a cat face, the other with a princess crown. He gripped them both, his hands trembling, and then he broke down. Not because he'd lost a court case, but because he'd just lost two tiny lives who had trusted him more than their own flesh and blood. 3 days later, Logan drove to the rundown neighborhood where Tom Reeves was temporarily staying. He didn't plan to do anything reckless. He just wanted to see the girls, just once, even from a distance. He stood at the street corner, watching from his car, a dilapidated third-floor apartment, its window draped with a torn curtain, its balcony rusted. A small face appeared in the frame. Emma. Logan's heart tightened. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply pressed her hand against the glass. Then, as if sensing something, Emma turned fully, raising her hand in a faint wave. Logan flinched. Under the fading glow of the sunset, her eyes held a promise. "Uncle, don't give up. We're waiting." Logan didn't wave back. He just placed a hand on his chest, where his heart beat with aching resolve, and whispered, "I'll bring you both back, no matter what it takes." The courtroom that morning was as silent as a grave. Sunlight streamed through the towering glass window, settling on Logan's shoulders, making him look like a warrior returning from a realm of pain, not proud but with a quiet determination blazing in his heart. Attorney Susan Bennett stood up, her voice calm yet resolute. "Your Honor, the defense requests to present new evidence and testimony from a key witness. This individual was a next-door neighbor of Mr. Tom Reeves for the past 3 years and is the only person to have witnessed his severe ethical violations firsthand." A faint murmur rippled through the room. The back door creaked open. An elderly woman, petite in stature, clutching a faded fabric bag, stepped inside. Her hair was streaked with silver, but her eyes burned bright, as if holding an entire sky of buried justice. "What is your name?" the judge asked. "I'm Judith Wallace. I used to live in apartment 304, right next to Mr. Tom Reeves." Logan glanced at Susan, a spark of hope flashing in his eyes. He'd never met this woman, but Susan's words from the night before echoed clearly in his mind. If she agrees to testify, we've got a real shot. Judith took a deep breath and began. "I've seen Mr. Reeves bring strange women home, often while drunk. One time I heard a young girl screaming. She couldn't have been more than 20. He yelled, smashed things, and, 'I'm sorry, but I can't stay silent any longer.'" She pulled an old phone from her bag and handed it to the court clerk. "I recorded it, because I was afraid a day like this might come. This is from the night of June 14th last year. The sound of a button being pressed filled the air. The room echoed with the noise of an argument, breaking glass, and then a man's furious voice roaring, "Shut up! You think I need you? I can start over with anyone. Get out of my house!" Gasping breaths, muffled sobs, and the slam of a door followed. Silence fell over the room. Susan rose again. "In addition to the violent behavior substantiated by this testimony and evidence, we are submitting 3 anonymous complaints from women who previously lived with Mr. Reeves. All reveal a consistent pattern of controlling, abusive, and psychologically unstable conduct." The judge frowned. The plaintiff sighed. Representing Tom, lowered their heads, unable to muster a rebuttal. Logan clenched his fists. He didn't feel triumph, only a quiet warmth spreading through his chest. Partly justice, partly the hope of being a father again. The judge pondered for a moment before speaking, his voice resounding through the room. "With this new evidence, the court hereby suspends Mr. Tom Reeves' custody rights and awards custody of Emma and Sophie to Mr. Logan Pierce. The court mandates a 3-month supervised care period before permanent guardianship is confirmed." No one clapped, but the way Emma leapt from her seat, darted across the room, and threw herself into Logan's arms was enough to make that moment eternal. "I knew you'd come for us," Sophie whispered, pressing her cheek against his chest, where his heart beat with tearful thumps. Logan pulled both girls close, bowing his head slightly, unable to hold back the tears that had waited far too long to fall. The ash-gray sky stretched endlessly over the ancient cemetery like a heavy blanket draped over Logan's heart. The willow tree beside the gravestone swayed gently in the wind, its leaves drifting down like the last whispers of autumn. Logan walked slowly, holding Emma and Sophie's hands, two girls who were no longer nameless children lost in the unfamiliar streets, but his daughters. His flesh and blood, his reason to learn how to love again, to live again, and to believe that the cracks in his heart might one day heal. Before them stood a simple stone slab etched with the words, Sarah Everett Pierce. A mother, a free spirit, a heart that never stopped loving. 1988-2024. Logan knelt down, carefully placing the bundle of lavender flowers Sophie had brought at the base of the grave. The gentle fragrance was like a memory, like the final embrace he hadn't had the chance to give. "Hey, Sarah," he said softly, his voice catching. "I've brought the kids to see you." A breeze picked up, brushing against his cheek like a tender caress. Logan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them, staring at the headstone as if she were standing there. Her crooked smile and those eyes that could calm even the wildest storm. "I couldn't be there for you when you needed me most. I didn't know to ask, didn't have the courage to come back for you. But I promise you, from this day forward, everything I do will be for our children." He turned to look at Emma and Sophie, two young faces, yet their eyes already bore the weight of growing up too soon. They stood silently, still gripping his hands tightly. "I was a selfish man once, kids," he said. "A man who only cared about work, ambition, and lost the most precious thing in his life. But your mother left me a gift, not just you two, but a chance to start over." He pulled a letter from his inner pocket. It was the letter Sarah had written, found in a small box hidden behind an old photograph. Her slanted handwriting still seemed to carry her breath. "If one day you read these words, it means I'm no longer here. But I want you to know, I never blamed you. I only wished, just once, that you'd look into our children's eyes and see. They carry the same light that used to shine in yours, back when you still believed in love." Logan clutched the letter tightly, as if it were both Sarah's final goodbye and the beginning of the rest of his life. He stood up, holding his daughter's hands, and stepped closer to the grave. Beneath the shadow of the willow, he placed a hand on the cold stone and whispered, as if making a vow to himself, "I'll take them to school every day, tell them bedtime stories until they fall asleep. I'll learn to braid hair, bake cookies, play with dolls if they want. I'll be there for parent-teacher meetings, school plays, and even the sad days they don't want anyone to know about. I won't abandon them again, Sarah, never." Emma looked up at her father, her blue eyes brimming with emotion. "Will you teach me to play the piano, Dad? Mom said you were really good." Logan smiled, though his eyes were blurred with tears. "I'll start from scratch, if you want to hear me play." Sophie knelt beside the grave, whispering into the wind, "Mom, we have a dad now. A real dad." A gentle breeze swept through, carrying a few lavender petals drifting in the air, as if it were a nod from someone on the other side. The three of them stood together for a long time. No one rushed them, no one hurried. For the first time in years of being lost, their hearts finally beat as one. A family pieced together from the fragments of love